my beautiful souls. Welcome to Spiritual Bloom, where we bloom within our consciousness with your spiritual guide and twin flame coach Neha. In today's episode, we will be discovering the science which actually confirms that your divine masculine is awakening. Have you noticed your divine masculine becoming distant, then suddenly more reflective? Has he stopped chasing distractions? Or has he begun questioning everything about his life? Many people mistake these changes as confusion or emotional instability, but sometimes these are not signs of someone falling apart. They are signs of a soul waking up. So today we are going to explore the deeper signs that divine masculine is spiritually awakening. Whether you are in communication or separation or have no contact at all, understanding these signs will help you recognize what is happening beneath the surface. Now, before we discuss the signs, it is important to understand what actually awakening means in this journey. So, the divine masculine awakening is not about becoming more spiritual overnight. Actually, it is the gradual collapse of their false identity, the false mask that they were carrying for so long or their soul created just for survival. Now, for many years, many divine masculines have learned to suppress emotions, avoid vulnerability, seek validation through achievement, relationships, money, or status. But eventually, the soul can no longer tolerate living disconnected from its true nature. The soul can no longer tolerate being in that false mask. So life begins removing everything that no longer aligns with who they truly are. And this process can feel extremely painful because awakening requires you to surrender. Now, the first sign that you come to know that the divine masculine is awakening is that he begins questioning his entire life. They feel a deep dissatisfaction. Suddenly, the career that once motivated him feels meaningless. The lifestyle that he enjoyed once no longer fulfills him. His friendships collapse and they start feeling superficial. Even his routine starts feeling empty. Externally, it might look like nothing must have changed, but internally, everything is changing, slowly but gradually. Because the soul begins asking questions like, why am I here? What is my purpose? There has to be something more than this. I cannot keep on going or keep on doing these things or following such routines, such lifestyles anymore. So this existential questioning is often the beginning of awakening. Secondly, the ego starts losing control. The divine masculine often builds a strong ego as protection. That's why we consider that divine masculines are often seen very egotistical. Because their ego says that I don't need anyone. They're hyper independent. I have everything under control. They don't like asking for help. I'm fine. I'm good. All by myself. But what does awakening do? Awakening exposes the limitation of the ego. Situations begins unfolding that cannot be controlled. The plan starts failing. Relationship starts changing. Unexpected losses start occurring. And in these situations, the ego fails. And even if they act hyper independent or act like they don't need help, in these situations, the universe makes them extremely bound to ask help. because if they don't ask help, they will always be stuck in that ego. And if such tower moments don't happen in their life, like business failing, relationship failing, they will never understand that what does hardships bring in a person's life. That you always cannot be egotistical. Sometimes it is healthy to ask for help. So, in this process, the universe is not punishing the divine masculine. It is simply teaching them to surrender. Because the ego resists, it doesn't allow the soul to surrender. But the universe teaches them to surrender so that their soul expands. Thirdly, the divine masculine feels intense emotional waves. Now, many divine masculines are conditioned to disconnect from their emotions. But awakening process reverses that. Because old grief surfaces, childhood wounds emerges, anger, sadness, fear or loneliness all begin asking to be acknowledged. They have to acknowledged. Previously, they simply ignored such emotions. But now, because of awakening, they have to acknowledge all these darker sides. And this emotional release is extremely necessary because healing cannot happen through suppression. When you suppress, you cannot heal. Fourthly, childhood trauma begins surfacing. This is one of the strongest signs. The divine masculine may suddenly remember painful childhood experiences. Perhaps emotional neglect, their parents neglected them, criticisms, abandonment by their parents. Perhaps growing up believing that expressing emotion was weakness, crying was weakness, asking for help was weakness. That is how, they have been taught and they have been raised, forcefully raised in that situation because their family was not supportive and they abandoned them at a very young age, or they had to carry on family responsibilities since a very young age. So these memories, they surface because the nervous system finally feels ready to process them, and healing begins at the root. When childhood trauma surfaces, that is when the healing begins at the root. And this is the most important part because your nervous system is healing. And when the nervous system is healing, it becomes ready to accept and process those emotions. Fifth sign is that the divine masculine starts pulling away from toxic people around him. Because you know that awakening changes what? It changes your frequency. Similarly, when the divine masculine's frequency is changing, they no longer tolerate any toxic people, toxic behaviors or toxic environment. Relationships that were based on manipulation, competition, control or any kind of superficial validation begins falling apart naturally. And that happens because their frequency is high. And the divine masculine may withdraw from his old friends, relatives. They may spend more time alone. But that time alone, that isolation is not depression. Sometimes such kind of isolation is necessary because the soul is protecting its transformation. Now the sixth sign is that synchronicities becomes impossible to ignore. They will see repeated numbers, meaningful dreams, songs appearing at the perfect moment, unexpected encounters, signs that answer their silent prayers. Sometimes they even see the names of the divine feminine in a book, in a, now we have so many Instagram, social media, so they keep on seeing their names again and again. This is a sign from the universe. So the divine masculine, what happens when they go through such synchronicities, they initially dismiss these experiences thinking that it is just a coincidence. But eventually, as they evolve and they start awakening, the pattern becomes too obvious that they cannot ignore. And when they cannot ignore, they start contemplating that why am I seeing all these things again and again? This has something to do with this person or this relationship or this bond. Initially they'll ignore, but gradually it will make them question that why am I seeing all these repeated numbers, signs, symbols, names again and again? Because the universe begins communicating through synchronicity. The seventh sign is that the divine masculine feels drawn towards spiritual knowledge. Perhaps someone who once mocked spirituality suddenly begins reading spiritual books, watching videos, even meditating, learning about consciousness, energy, healing, knowing their purpose in life. Because awakening naturally expands curiosity. They become more curious to know about what these synchronicities are trying to tell them. And the soul begins seeking truth rather than distraction. The distractions which were previously quite noisy in their life, they start becoming quiet because they start reflecting within themselves. The eighth sign is that the divine masculine no longer finds comfort in escapism. Many divine masculines cope or try to run away from this connection through work, gaming, partying, excessive social media, or constantly staying busy, overworking, workaholic. But during awakening, these distractions stop working. It doesn't work anymore. Temporary pleasure no longer fills their inner emptiness. And that is also the time when they start questioning themselves that why my work is not satisfying me, why partying is not satisfying me. They feel a sense of void within themselves because the soul is asking for transformation and not distraction. So no matter how much they try to escape, at one point there will be a full stop. From that point they cannot escape anymore. The ninth sign is that the divine masculine's heart begins opening. The heart chakra finally starts opening. And this is one of the most beautiful signs, when the divine masculine's heart chakra actually opens. Because in case of divine masculines, the upper chakras are closed. Like they are absolutely closed compared to the divine feminines. And in case of divine feminines, they have to work more on their lower chakras. So the divine masculines have to work more on their upper chakras. And when their heart chakra starts opening, the compassion increases. They become more empath. And they begin noticing the suffering of others. They become more soft, patient, and authentic. And gradually they realize that strength no longer means emotional distance. It begins meaning emotional maturity. So they start gaining emotional maturity once their heart chakra opens. And the 10th sign is that the runner energy starts weakening. Many people misunderstand the runner. They think that the runner is running away from the twin flame. But the runner is not running from the twin flame. The runner is actually running from what? Running from unresolved pain. So as awakening progresses, avoidance becomes exhausting. They cannot avoid anymore. At one point of time, I told you, it becomes extremely exhausting. Because running no longer provides them relief. And eventually, healing becomes easier than escaping. The 11th sign is that the divine masculine starts taking responsibility. Instead of blaming others, they start asking themselves that what can I learn? Where did I contribute to this, or how can I grow in this? And eventually they even start taking responsibility of this journey of the divine feminine. So this shift from blame, carelessness to responsibility marks a profound spiritual maturity. The 12th sign is that there is increased solitude. Many divine masculines naturally withdraw during the awakening process, not because they hate people. It's because the inner transformation requires silence. They need to sit with themselves in order to fight with the demons. And to fight with the demons, it requires them to be in isolation. Because the soul needs space, it needs reflection, it needs stillness. And healing often happens in solitude before it appears physically in this relationship or this dynamic. Another sign is that the intuition strengthens. They start trusting their inner knowing, their intuitions. The gut feelings becomes more stronger. They can sense people's intentions more clearly, and they notice the energy rather than somebody's appearance. Previously, they used to dismiss their intuition, and they always operated through guesswork, and because of that guesswork, many fields in their life used to go wrong. Let it be relationship, let it be business, let it be work, because they never followed their intuition. So slowly and gradually they understand that intuition has to be followed, and that intuition becomes their guidance. Another symptom is that they feel an inner pull towards the divine feminine. Even during separation or even without communication, the energetic connection often becomes stronger. The divine masculine may think about her unexpectedly, dream of her, or feel emotions in waves without any explanation. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean there will be an immediate reunion. It means that the soul remembers what the mind tried to forget. It tried to run away from the divine feminine, but eventually, as they heal in this journey, they feel a pull towards their divine feminine. Another sign is that, this is the last one, the divine masculine starts choosing peace over ego. Winning arguments or being right in the room loses importance. Being right feels less important than being authentic. They prioritize being authentic. Competition transforms into cooperation. Control transforms into trust. And this is one of the clearest indicators that the heart has begun leading instead of the ego. That is how the ego death happens in a twin flame journey in case of the divine masculine. Now, you also have to understand that not every divine masculine awakens at the same time. They have their own different divine timings. And not every awakening leads immediately to reunion. It takes time, months, sometimes years. So awakening is an individual soul journey. Some awaken quickly according to their karmic cycles, karmic deaths, while as others they take years. Some people they awaken through loss in their life, and others awaken through love. But the timing belongs to the divine. That's why I say everybody has their own divine timing. Now, in such situations, what does the divine feminine do? What should she do if she is sensing that the divine masculine is awakening? Now, if you are a divine feminine and you recognize these signs, do not chase your masculine. Do not force your masculine for anything. And most importantly, don't try to become his teacher. Like I told you, you are individual in your own journey. They are individual in their own journey. You are fighting your own battles. They are fighting their own battles. You are clearing your own karmic accounts, karmic debts, karmic cycles. They are doing the same. So don't try to become the other person's teacher. Just let them be. Let them heal on their own. Let them awaken on their own. Trust his soul's process, because your responsibility is firstly your own healing. The more grounded, peaceful, and emotionally integrated you become, the more you embody the frequency of unconditional love. And when you embody the frequency of unconditional love, your divine masculine also starts awakening faster according to that speed of your healing. Because remember, awakening is something that you cannot rush, because every soul has its own sacred timing. So, the divine masculine's awakening is not about becoming perfect. Yes, I can say that they are transforming from a distorted masculine to a divine masculine. But that does not mean that divine masculine is perfect. Nobody is perfect. It is simply about becoming authentic. It is a journey from fear to love. Previously they operated from fear. Now slowly they'll operate from unconditional love. Previously they operated from ego. Now they'll operate from soul. Previously they operated for survival. Now it's for the purpose, their soul purpose. So if your divine masculine is showing some of these signs, honor the process with patience rather than expectations. Please don't keep any kind of expectations, because you will be the one who will be disappointed at the end of the day. And if you are the divine masculine watching this video, know that what feels like your world is falling apart may actually be your soul coming home. So if you like this episode, do like, share, subscribe and comment. For any kind of personal guidance, you can WhatsApp or email me. My contact details have been given in the description box. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again in another episode.